Welcome to Some Guy's Garage. I've got a good one for you today. We're going to compare Dewalt's top impact drivers. Starting off on the left, I've got the DCF801. This is the 12-volt brushless. Next to that, I have the DCF887. This is the older 20-volt brushless impact driver. This used to be the top one. And then moving to the right here, the two really new ones, we have the DCF850. This is of the Atomic lines, again 20-volt brushless. And finally, this one should be the new top dog, but we're going to find out today. This is the DCF845, which is supposed to take the place of the old 887 and has some slightly better specs. So we're going to see if this guy really can unthrone the 850, which is a very popular model now, and the 887, which has been around for a long time and has been a really good impact driver. So let me just talk you through some of the specs. The 801 is rated for 1150 inch-pounds, 2850 RPM, and 3600 impacts per minute. Moving up to the 887, this one's 1825 inch-pounds of torque, which is a little less than 700 more than this one. It's 3250 RPM, so slightly higher RPM, and 3800 impacts per minute, so another couple hundred impacts per minute over the smaller one. Moving on to the 850, this one actually has identical specs to the 887. So 1825 inch-pounds, 3250 RPM, and 3800 impacts per minute, so identical specs between the 887 and the 850. So it'll be interesting to see if the smaller sized 850 can actually keep up with the older 887. And then finally the 845, this one's again rated for 1825 inch-pounds, so same torque as the other two models here, but this one is 3400 RPM, that's 150 RPM up on these guys, and 4200 impacts per minute, so that's 400 up on these guys. So should have a slight advantage in the specs there, although not any more torque. And just before we get started on the testing, we want to take a look and see how much each one of these weigh, see what the weight difference is or weight penalty is, maybe getting the higher torque models versus something a little smaller. So starting off with the 801, it weighs 789 grams. The 887 weighs 930 grams. The 850 weighs 947 grams. And the 845 weighs 922 grams. So small differences in the weight amongst these, but might make a little bit of a difference if you're holding it over your head all day. And then of course the other big differentiator between these is the size of the heads. So just taking a quick measurement, this one is basically bang on 5 inches or maybe a little bit more than 5 inches. This one's closer to 5.5. This being the smallest is just under 4 inches. And this one is about 5.25, give or take. So this has gotten a little smaller than the existing 887. Kind of take a look at that side by side here. There is just a little bit less depth, but then the 850 in particular is, let's put them the other way around here, has a much shorter head. Okay, and on to the test. And it's a pretty simple one. It's what we do all day with these impact drivers, and that is drive construction screws. So these are standard 3-inch construction screws with the proper Robertson head. That's the best kind of screw head, and I don't want any arguments in the comments about that. But what I'll do is just drive 3 of the screws back to back with each of the impact drivers, and we'll see which one's the fastest. We'll start off with the DCF801. Okay, pretty good. And just so you know, it was on the high setting. I'm going to do them all in their top settings, but pretty good. Let's move on to the 887. Okay, I've got the 887. It's on a freshly charged power stack to give it the best possible performance. Let's go. Again, quite good. Let's move on to the 850. All right, 850, again on a power stack. Let's go. Caught my fingers on one of the screws, so just to give it a fair chance, I've moved the screw over and we're going to start again on this test. Okay, so I had a few troubles with my first couple attempts at this. The head of the 850, because it's a little bit wider, it's a little bit thicker, I kept bumping into the screw next to it. So I've restarted the kind of the 2 back screws to give them some offset. They're again still at the same height, and I've got a freshly charged power stack. So let's give this another try here. Pretty good performance, felt similar speed to the 887, but the big head got in the way and was a little more awkward to use. So maybe not the best choice. I guess we'll see how the 845 does next. Okay, the 845, another freshly charged power stack. Let's go. Not bad. That went pretty quick. It felt noticeably faster than the 887 and the 845, and didn't have any issues with head spacing either because it is a narrower head on it. So this might very well be the champion, but I don't think we're settled quite here yet. Okay, we're going to give them a little bit more of a challenge here. These are 1/4 inch by 5 inch lag bolts. And so these will take a little bit more time, and we can time each one of them independently. They're just finger tight in one of the existing screw holes. So kind of using that as a pilot, not giving them any kind of advantage. We're just going to go straight into the wood without a pre-drill like you probably would normally do with these. Okay, again, starting off with the DCF801, I'm using a 3/8 to 7/16 socket adapter to drive them with. So that's the DCF801. Next up, we'll do the DCF887. Okay, that was definitely much faster than the 801, but as to be expected. Next up, the 805. Pretty good, similar. We'll see what the times are on the screen. I couldn't really tell the difference between the two. And finally, the 845. That guy definitely brought the beans. So just before my closing thoughts, I'm going to flash all of the specs and test results up on the screen here so you can see. As expected, the 801 12 volt is not nearly as fast as the 20 volt impacts, but it is a nice lightweight option. The 887 still slightly outperforms the 850 despite the identical specs from Dewalt. Not bad for such an old model. The 850 for its stubby size performs quite well, though doesn't quite have as many beans as I expected. The 845 is definitely the king, consistently and noticeably faster than the other 20 volt impacts. Okay, so final thoughts on these Dewalt impact drivers. I'm impressed with the 801, just given its size and weight and compact nature. I didn't expect it to drive all those that well, and honestly, if you're into the 12 volt line, it's not a bad option. I really like the DCF801 screwdriver that comes in this lineup too, so with that as a companion, it's kind of a nice tool. The DCF887, honestly, it still performs really well. I think if you own these, I have a couple of them just because I've had them probably going on 8-10 years now. They work well, they're still quite good performers, specs-wise and in terms of driving the bolts and screws in. So it might not even be worth upgrading if you already have 887s that are working well. You're not going to see a huge performance increase, but there are some nice features that I'll get to on the next two drivers. The DCF850, pretty much bang on with the old 887 in terms of performance, but you get that tiny head. So if you're in tight quarters up in a joist cavity next to ductwork or something like that, the smaller size really does come in handy. Although it's only smaller this way, it is wider this way, which I ran into some trouble here today with testing just because of the extra width of the head and the not so stubby nose. So something to be aware of, but otherwise, it's impressive what Dewalt's done to shrink down all the performance out of the old 887 into a tool the size of the 850 here. And then finally, the 845. That really impressed me. It is a step up from these two in terms of performance. It does drive screws faster. It also feels really smooth. So there's just something about probably the higher impact rate that makes it, while it's driving those screws, feel a little more controlled maybe. But really impressed. And you can get these two for about the same price on sale. So I think I actually paid exactly the same price for these as bare tools, which if given the choice, I'd actually take the 845 over the 850 personally, I think. But of course I have both here, so I guess I can pick and choose which one I'll end up using. In the end though, you really can't go wrong with a good impact driver. They're a very handy tool to have, and I highly recommend everyone has one in their kit. If you're still using a drill to drive screws, you really need to pick up one of these impact drivers. Anyway, that's all for today. If you have any questions about the Dewalt impact drivers, leave them in the comments below. If you aren't already subscribed, please consider it. And as always, thanks for watching.